Not all of us can have this tracksuit swag.
Hey, folks. Robert Barry Fleming here, Executive Artistic Director, Actors Theater of Louisville. Thank you for joining us for the How We Made. Where did you sit? Where did we sit on the bus? I've got some spectacular folks here. This play by Brian Quijada and directed by Matt Dickson. A digital creation by Satya Chávez and Matt Dickson, starring Satya Chávez. We are so thrilled to have all three of you here joining us. Welcome, y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
So happy to be here.
Before we get started, I just want to do a special thanks to Brown Forman for their support of our virtual season and the Brown Forman Main Stage series. A special thanks to Delta Dental, our event sponsor for these opportunities to gather in a virtual space. I want to roll a clip right from the start. So let's hit it, Philip.
I snapped. Quijada. That's my name. Quesadilla is a cheeseville tortilla. Those are not the same.
Good.
That one stays.
Hey, that's so perfectly captures what it's like to try to transfer the theater to the virtual space. This was quite a journey, wasn't it, folks?
Understatement of the year. Yes, what a journey.
What kind of resilience and spirit of fun that you all had in making this transfer. I want to start with you, Brian. Can you tell us a little bit about the origin of this story? What inspired you to write it as a one-person play?
For sure. I mean, I like to describe this piece as like a theatrical mixtape of my life. And it's hard to say when I started writing this because I've kind of always written poems and raps. I grew up in a house that played a lot of hip hop music and played all sorts of types of music. But some pieces in this show I wrote as early as high school, college, all the good stuff. And there came a point when I was living in New York and I was like waiting on the phone to ring, or the email to come in. Yeah. And I was just like, I don't think anybody's ever going to write me the perfect piece, or like, waiting on like the right role or whatever. So I started compiling all these poems that were like, race related, cultural identity, familial identity stories that I had been writing over the years, and put it together into what eventually became this show. Putting all my beatboxing, dancing, looping, the works, all the things that I love doing, and did it for a long time, and this has been one of the most amazing experiences of now seeing the next step in the journey of this show, which is having Satya and Matt come on and reinterpret it. And also in a virtual version of it is very exciting. So it kind of started, off of me wanting to see more wanting to be in roles that more that I identified with.
So let's get a little timeline here. How do you and Matt know each other, and what was your first collaboration?
So back in 2014, I think it was 2014. I like I said, I wrote this play, and I had been directed. It was very early on to me. Maybe I was like a year and a half into living in New York, and I had been in a short play that was directed by Matt, written by Krista Knight. And I can't remember what the name of the play was, but it was like an adaptation of Peter Pan. And he directed it, and he was, we instantly clicked, and I'm like, hey, will you take a look at this piece? And so this was years ago, where we kind of like first started developing together. And once it premiered in Chicago, I submitted it to everywhere, right? I said, when you write a play, you submit it everywhere. Just like, anybody, will you please read it? And when it was accepted by Victory Gardens Ignition Festival, which is when Che Yu started working on it. But very early on, the first few workshops were done with Matt. So it's also it feels like a full circle moment where we come back to it in this new version where we kind of left, where we start right where we left off in where the initial process started.
Matt, why's the collaboration between you and Brian such a special one, and one that works creatively?
You mean the story he just told, how he replaced me as a director?
Well, we're not here for sour grapes, my brother. We just want to hear why you two make magic.
There are no sour grapes. That is all in love and love and good fun. What was the question, Robert?
That you two seem to create magic whenever you work together, and I'm curious about what is it about the collaboration between the two of you that makes that possible?
Great question. We have been longtime friends. I think a similar. Brian has always been my musical guide. Brian keeps me relevant in many ways, and I've always thought he was a brilliant composer and writer, and I think it is exciting to see the rest of the profession readily acknowledging that. And Brian, I think that has also been a journey from performer to solo creator to writer to composer, and it's it's an easy process when you have really explosive source material. Then I think you do your best to steer it in the right direction.
Well, there's such a astounding visual sense and oral sense of expertise there. And it's no surprise that somehow Satya would find her way into this world. Satya, can you tell me the first time that you met Brian? How did you all have your first connection?
The first time I met Brian, I hardly remembered the time. The first time I met Brian was actually at a theater festival through the Kennedy Center. They host a collegiate acting competition called the Irene Ryans. Yes. And that's actually how I also met Michael Legg, who introduced me to Actors Theater of Louisville's professional training company. But Brian was really good friends with Idris Goodwin, who I know is also very closely tied to Actors Theater. I know, it's just these little webs, they just shoot out, and then if you can get yourself caught in the throngs of Brian's or Idris's webs, you're in good hands. But I had the privilege of competing on a national level. I won the 2014 competition, and afterwards somehow bumped into Idris and Brian, and we went out and had a good time, and the rest is history. Before I knew it, we were meeting again for the first time at the Kennedy Center a few years later to work on his newest production with Hansel Jung called Undesirables, which is also a live looping musical. And that kind of like cracked my world open in the way that I had been viewing theater. I think very similarly to Brian, I found myself never finding the roles or opportunities that allowed me to fully explore the breadth of my artistry. And meeting Brian kind of like just kicked a big hole wide open for me. And I've never been more excited to work with an artist in my entire life. So don't take that lightly, Brian.
That's very
you blew a hole wide open for all kinds of artists who haven't necessarily been able to plug themselves into the stereotypical musical theater format. And it just like made theater cool. Brian made theater cool for me. And then I just like kept, hanging out with Brian whenever he had a project. And then this little piece came along, and I get a call from Brian saying, "Hey, we're thinking about gender bending this show, and I'm thinking about stepping away from it personally. Would you mind looking over it and seeing if you think it could be gender bent? And I took a quick read through and very much identified with the story in such a way that I asked Brian, like, are you sure you're not a lesbian? Like, this is pretty much my story. It's my story. It's a lesbian woman's story. It oozes lesbian all over it. And Brian was like, yeah, so that's really great. We're not gonna be offering you anything. I just wanted your feedback, to which I was like, oh my gosh, of course not. Like, that's totally fine. I'd love to help out however I can. Fast forward maybe a week later, and Brian's calling me being like, hey, actually, you're the only person I want to do the job. Yeah. And here I am. Months later.
We were trying to seduce Brian and Matt and say, hey, y'all want to do the show, and I want to talk about two pieces of that. One, the idea of moving from a live event to a digital creation and what that process and journey was like. And then the deep, essential understanding that from the minute that Brian was like, I think I'm past this, but I am really excited about an artist named Satya Chávez, and would love to investigate it from that perspective. That began to be something that was very intriguing. It's like, because it's not the kind of thing you hear often, that somebody's that excited about someone. So I was curious about how you found your way into it, how Matt and Brian, you found your way to a live event and moving it into a digital creation. And ultimately, Matt, how you and Satya began this collaboration jointly in that endeavor. So any of that piece, what could you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, it's news to me that Brian was so excited about me since he played it so cool on the phone.
Listen, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on, but just read it. Let me tell you what you're saying. Like, I had no idea what was happening actually, but like I was trying to just see what you're trying to get your temperature. But yeah, I mean, like the call with Emily Tarquin. Shout out Emily for being a huge advocate.
Brilliant artistic producer.
Going on. When we talked and it had come to a point where I felt that I talk a lot about the what it's been like doing this show all over the country in red states and blue states, and the show is not political. I don't think when you talk about immigration and some of the topics that the story tends to cover, it's hard to separate politics from the issues that we're talking about. And so, people get heated, and I think it's great. Like it sparks, that's what theater should do, is spark conversations, speak to empathy. And I'd come to a point of doing it all throughout a Trump presidency, being like, I think I'm done doing it for a little bit. And which was when we were like, cool, that was the first variable, right? Being like, cool, can somebody else do it? And then it was like, cool, can we switch? Can we swap some gender in here? And I knew that that Satya was somebody who could do it because I had taught her. She had gone through what we're joking is the Quijada School of Looping, which I might make it an official thing, Robert. Okay?
Yeah, man.
I hope when I do it, you can shout everybody out and be like, you got to join the Quijada School of Looping.
Absolutely, man. I'll be first in line.
and so I knew that she could do the looping. I knew that she could do the looping, and that she was an incredibly talented artist. And so when the pandemic hit, that was when Matt and I mean all of us, right, were kind of, the world went upside down for a second, and we had that meeting where we were like, cool, like, doesn't Actors Theater have like a parking lot? Like, let's do a drive-in show. Or like, all right, cool, like, are we doing this? Like, we at the time, I'm still kind of watching the Instagram live battles, and we were super pumped about that. I mean, there were like 1.9 million people watched that this past one.
Wow.
And so we were like, is it something live? Is it something that we do live? And then considering, how much we didn't know about internet connection and, what that live portion would be. Now people are beginning to figure it out, right? But I think this, because we're doing live looping and because we're doing we started veering towards inspired by Black is King, right? Beyonce, like the visual concept album. I think that then led to us being pretty full on, like 100%, like we're going in that direction, I think. But yeah, so there's like a lot of change, it's very fast changes that happened very quickly of like, cool, you're not going to be in it. Cool. We're switching genders. Cool. We're doing it. We're doing it live. We're doing it, making a movie. And there was times where, we were like, okay, cool. Can we go to Chicago? Can we all be together? And to be safe, it felt like the best thing to not be together. And which now you look at it and you're just like, what a kick-ass story of Matt and Satya have never met
in person. Yes.
And it's quite an achievement. I find it incredibly unbelievable, and I'm so proud of them and the work that they've done. But like Matt, maybe you want to go from talking about once that became the process.
Sure. It was a journey of denial, and then and then acceptance, and then embracing limitations. I grew up in Louisville, and so I was over the moon to get back and reconnect with that community. And I think once we discovered that we were going to be virtual, the pandemic was underway at that point, and I had been doing some experimentation in virtual theater, and so I was excited by the possibilities, but terrified by what they would mean for this project specifically, just because I didn't know how to do it. And once it became clear that this was going to be a remote capture, I think something shifted, right? I think when you're the parameters, when the definition of the parameters become clear, I think that's in many ways what allows some exciting art to happen, even when you're, in tears and kicking and screaming. And so Satya and I, began this lengthy, beautiful, frustrating, extraordinary collaboration, and
it was quite extraordinary.
It was extraordinary, and I'm grateful to know her, and I'm not sure that there's anybody else on this earth that I have never met in person that I feel closer with, or who I know so intimately. I could tell you a lot about Satya Chávez, her partner, and her daily routine.
I'm gonna ask Philip to pull up a clip. Philip, if you can pull up the boom rehearsal number one, bring it up to 143 or 208. 208. We'll share a little bit of that while I ask this question. Brian, I'm sorry, Matt. The way that you embraced this platform was surreal. So you did a lot of experimentation, and I just want to play a little clip of some of that. Knock it out, Philip.
We were so naive.
This is just a book light.
Cut. Cut. Thanks, Philip.
I love that video.
That is one of my I remember going to the Dropbox and seeing and I was like, well, that is a cool effect. Now where is that, and how's that gonna and yet
nowhere.
It took every bit of those kinds of experiments. Can you talk about that process of where you started and how you ended with such a sophisticated, nuanced, and elegant rendition, visual image words of this this particular experience?
First of all, thank you. It was our methodology revolved around screen sharing. Zoom was our foundational platform for communication. So I would Zoom in with Satya, and then Satya would AirPlay her iPhone, and so that I could see through her camera. And then we utilized a third-party app called Filmic Pro, which is essentially just makes really effective use of your iPhone cameras regarding light and focus. And then it became a process of trial and error and a game of trust, because Satya couldn't see the screen, right? Or she couldn't see herself on camera. So it was a lot of me saying, move 2 inches to the left, and her, her inhibiting her feelings about strangling me. And then
no way. Don't let him let you believe for a second that this was anything but a loving relationship from start to finish. Truly, like we were so in love the whole time.
Yeah,
the whole time.
It's true. And so, yeah, it evolved over time. I mean, eventually I was able to control her desktop remotely, so I could throw audio tracks, which
we learned that so late in the game.
Yeah, we learned that so late in the game that almost,
so cool, so helpful.
Feels inconsequential. Yeah, just feels inconsequential. But it was a wacky exploration for sure. And I think, I think that. I don't know if there's anybody else. I just think we were true collaborators in every sense of the word.
Philip,
what's amazing is that you look at that clip and you're like, oh, the red, that kind of red. I don't know what that. It looked like a red tablecloth knit or whatever what it was, but that led to that was just like, oh, cool, that looks cool. What if that was or the light, if you interpret that like the light of her actually coming out of the womb, or how do you play with light being I mean, especially when that scene is an interpretation of being in the womb, and light is in the text as playing it signifies the outside actual world, right? Those are the first, you can see the steps of how that led to the actual thing, how that led to
nothing in that video was actually used in the final.
But it was a necessary step in getting to what they eventually made.
Exactly.
It was indeed. If you can bring up Quijada close up, T3 MOV, just about 30 seconds. There's a little bit of the interplay. We get to hear Matt giving remote direction. Just we can go to the last kind of 30 seconds. It's amazing. This is spectacular.
So my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather ran away to lock himself in his place.
He wants the last home
30 for 20 years, too afraid to show his face, cried himself to sleep every night, until one day, finally, he vowed to claim redemption, pulled out of his depression just to teach the jerk a lesson. He announced his rebirth.
Fast forward to the last few seconds of it.
As a flaw. Grew up to have enormous jaws and a hunger for human flesh. My name is Quijada. Quijada spelled with a Q, not a K. Not with an H, but a J. Quijada. Whew! How was that?
Crushed it. Done with that. Crushed it.
I love that.
That was it. Just crushed it.
And I mean, this is what because we're doing a lot of virtual content ourselves, and this is kind of how you're able to do the communication and direct, literally over the waves, and it's been such an extraordinary collaboration.
What's particularly disheartening is when I would say, crushed it, beat. We're going to need to take that one more time. Your mouth was not in the shot.
Of course. We strive for excellence at every moment. And boy, did you all do it. Can you all talk a bit about the soundtrack? Because this is not only visually sumptuous, but it is a soundtrack like no other. And just the artistry that it takes to have this combination of spoken word and dialect and rapping. can you just talk a little bit about how you were able to do this in a remote setting? And I'm going to ask Philip to pull up On Daddy's Knee because there's so much artistry happening in so many different ways.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, go ahead, Doctor.
I was just going to say that this project was handed off to me by Brian in such a way that allowed me to explore and get creative within his compositions. We spent the first week or two learning the pieces of music that he had written for this show, and then I spent the following 4 months flipping a lot of that on its head. You'll recognize a lot of his original material, especially in Hope and Quijada and White Bread. But what I found myself doing, and I kind of built, and by kind of, I absolutely built a recording studio out of a closet in my apartment. And that's actually where the song Boom is filmed in. But it's completely sound paneled and soundproofed all throughout, ceiling and walls. And I had a microphone set up in there, and I just recorded every single loop, every single vocal, every instrument, and started mixing and mastering these songs to be consumed digitally. One of the concepts that we were playing with at one point is how do we keep the live nature of this piece?
Mm-hmm.
How do we keep this music? How do we give it a live feel? Even though inherently it couldn't be live because we were recording it. So we tried pre-recording all of the music so that all of the looping is performative, but you still understand it and you still witness it and how it would be done live. So you're watching me loop, although it is pre-recorded. And then we kept the vocals live in each recording, which made our jobs actually a lot harder than had we just recorded the whole shebang and just mimed it. But we really wanted to keep a live quality. So what we sacrificed was the perfection that Matt and I, and Brian, but Matt and I in particular, are like some kind of different genre of perfectionist to a fault. But we found ourselves, needing to get the one take. And in a lot of these scenes, you'll notice that they're pretty long scenes that we cut between. So everything that you hear coming out of my mouth is happening live and in that moment that we recorded. And sometimes it took like 20 different takes to get it right with the music that I had arranged and composed and mixed and mastered in a little recording studio on my own, and then brought to and added to develop an entire score for the place. So sometimes it took us 20 takes, and sometimes for some magical reason it would only take us 1 or 2. And this piece that you're about to pull up right now is one of those that I'll let Matt talk about this a second before we share it, but that we had 15 minutes of the perfect twilight sunlight left to get it right. So I had no time to get this piece just right. So I don't know if you have anything else to say about Matt, but that is what On My Dad's Knee is. It's truly live theater, and as best as we could create it.
I think that's all said very well. Improvising, we had very different ideas for this number. Shout out to Paul Werner, who is a wonderful lighting designer. And we had mapped out, in an effort to, if at this point, because we have committed to this, the concept of staying within this room, sort of treating it as our theatrical space, metaphorically and otherwise, it felt like we were running out of ideas of how do we visually innovate in this very in this 8x10 space. And so we had this lighting set up. We thought we had different ideas for camera setups for an over the shoulder shot and a close up on Satya's hands. And we're going to shoot, maybe this will be the first time we incorporate some semblance of the window. And then we were rehearsing in this light and we thought, oh, it's so perfect. But the idea of us being able to shoot in time to light is always often a failed endeavor, just because of the obstacles involved. And Satya just sort of hit it out of the park, and we thought, well, we just sort of settled on her face and the reflection from the television, which felt right, of the window that you never actually see out the window, which feels right, because also her dad is constantly, we're utilizing the TV. So yes, that's all. And then Satya,
we actually have two different angles of this exact moment. We had at one point intended to cut back and forth between two different camera shots, capturing the same moment. And after we watched this for the first time, without even having seen what the other footage looked like, Matt and I agreed, oh, this holds on its own. We just keep it like this. And that's how we got here. But if you show the other clip at any point, I'll prove to you I'm actually playing the piano live. I promise.
roll the clip, Philip. Thanks.
All right, On My Dad's Knee, song, take 2. When I was a kid, my dad would put me on his knee and ask me what it was I dreamed to be. His eyes would open wide, awaiting my response. The first thing I showed him was a picture drawn with crayons, a picture of a big red truck like the one that he had. I wanna be a trucker like you, Dad. But little did I know my father's daily grind, out of sight, out of mind. 4 a.m. wake up time, 6 or 7 his return. 14-hour days, work the clock till he earned his hard work pay. First driving with no papers on the highways. A pullover meant immigration taking him away. He busted his ass to keep us from the lower class, to live in contrast with his harsh, poor past. When I was a kid, my dad would put me on his knee and ask me what it was I dreamed to be. My father told me that he wanted me to be more wealthier than any Quijada had ever been before, with a college degree, his eyes on dollar signs, 'cause that was the whole point why he crossed the borderline. But in my early years I discovered my ability, realized the possibility of being supported, an idea so distorted I escaped into performing, rewarded for my expressions with what I found important. Art became the answer, a singer, a dancer, bringing joy to the universe, immersing peeps in rhymes I've interspersed in dance moves and verses and
and showbiz became my idea of down the road. Something I thought my father didn't understand, so he didn't know. I've seen my father play his guitar, though, with his eyes closed. Nobody watching him hit the high notes. Smiling away while he dreams of the better. But a better life in whatever light really has no definite measure. Art never called to him the way it calls to me. What he considers a luxury, I consider a necessity. I belong in art, and this art belongs in me. When I was a kid, my dad would put me on his knee and ask me what it was I dreamed to be. I think about the truck that I drew. That's not who I am, Dad. That's you.
It's you know what I find so brilliant about the work is that it's a very simple and beautiful kind of melody, and yet there's so many themes. It's like a coming of age story, an immigrant story, a story about an artist finding their voice, about finding your social location identity. What resonated most for each of you, and how did those stories intersect for you?
Woo, that's a very complicated question. I mean, I feel like it's so loaded with I think in a lot of ways, I think what makes me incredibly proud of seeing that, you know, song is it's so much about trust, right? Like there's like what the play was originally about, right? It is kind of reinterpreted in a way where I'm watching what it seems like is a separate artist, you know, like this character of Barry Quijada, kind of told through Satya Chávez, reinterpreted into like this is an artist who is I feel like in totally separate from whatever my journey was, a finding of their own voice, of what their identity is, artistic identity, and I think that's a really beautiful thing. And a lot of it was trust. You know, what's cool about the soundtrack is I taught it to her, and then it was completely, you know, kind of reinterpreted. I think inspired by the original music, but it's its own thing. It's its own beautiful version, and I think that's what's amazing is watching it. It is personal. I feel a personal connection to it, but I'm like, I didn't like it's. I feel separate from it. Like I'm looking into another person's life, and it's very hard to explain. It's very strange and bizarre and incredibly amazing to watch.
That's super awesome to hear. I think this song is a really good example of the way in which mine and Brian's and Matt's artistry all kind of intersect. As that specific song was originally written to be a rap all the way through. And as I sat with it and played around with it for a while and played with what chord progressions could live underneath it, I just started singing it, and it felt like my voice to get to sing it in that way. And that's actually the part of the show that probably resonates with me the most. The day that we filmed it, the day, as that is the evening the moment we filmed it was like the brink of evening. But that morning I had spent maybe an hour and a half talking with Matt and just crying about what that song brought up for me. I don't know if you remember that, Matt. But that relationship, Brian's relationship with his father is very similar in a lot of ways to the relationship I have with my immigrant father. And I think the pressures that come with this generation of children from immigrants to find success in whatever it is that they do is enormous, because our parents risked everything to create a better life for their children. So the way to best honor that decision as a child is to make it worth it for them. So I know personally, I've spent my entire life trying to make my father's journey out of poverty. I've taken it upon myself to work as hard as I possibly can to find success in such a way that I can share the benefits of that success with my family and with my father, especially. This line that Brian says, my father told me he wanted me to be more wealthier than any Quijada had ever been before, with a college degree and his eyes on dollar signs, because that's the point why he crossed the borderline. I think something that is so common in an immigrant child's experience is the enormous responsibility to find financial success, because that is so much of why people come to this country, to live out their American dreams so that they can give their children more than what they had. And I don't know that I could ever give a child more than what my parents gave me. I could not escape poverty to support my children as I grew up with that privilege. So I found myself really, really broken down and a mess at the state of the world that we were living in at that time. Still a Trump administration. And like not sure if this medium could actually implement any kind of social change, and really wanting to make a difference, just wanting to make a difference to bring all of the people in our communities out of that lower echelon, that bar that we can't seem to escape, all of us with these marginalized identities trying to work ourselves into the ground to find success. And that hope feels further and further away. And I think something that's really fascinating that Brian brings up is that he wrote this pre-Trump administration, performed it all throughout a Trump administration. I arguably also performed it during a Trump administration. And it wasn't until after we finished editing it that I started to find that hope again. So this piece kind of encapsulated all of that strife, all of that trauma, all of that struggle, and turning it into purpose, and to have this opportunity to find my voice in this show, in that piece, that gave me a new sense of purpose that I thought I had lost a long time ago. So thank you.
Matt, how did you so sensitively navigate all of that, those intersecting impulses and parts of the story? What's felt important to you in your process to help bring that to life, in this very acoustic, very simple space? And then we're going to talk about some of this spectacular SFX stuff that you did too, because that was wild.
I think I'll speak to the art, the mode and method. I think their answers. I have nothing to add really, as far as I'm glad that the story can reach a larger platform. I think the way, in terms of Brian and Satya, I think so much about this work is about navigating ego, and I think there are so many potential minefields. With Brian's original music, and then Satya yes-anding that music, and then yes-anding Brian, the methodology that Brian, in the way he's told this story for so many years. I think there's a lot of clenching that happens, right, when you're confronted with new modes. And so I'm grateful that we were all able to navigate that together. And I think that takes a lot of trust. And I think a number like that is a great example of that, of just, there was nothing I needed to what could I have added to that? I mean, setting up the shot, but I mean, giving Satya a runway, right? But at that point, I showed it to Brian, and Brian was like, "Oh my God!"
Floored. Right? I was like, "What?" It's also like I wrote this shit, Robert, and I was like, I was surprised by it. I was like, "What? How can I? What? I know this song in and out, and yet here I am, like a wreck, being like, how could this song? How could I
discover it again
differently? You know, it like I felt like it was my first time hearing a song like that. You know, hearing that song, and that's amazing. It's an incredible thing, and like, you know, a testament to these guys and an incredible amount of trust. I keep going back to that, but it's just, you know, it's having, you know, collaborators that you've worked with for many years, that you've you know, you create a rapport with, and I trust both of them, and Satya is an incredible composer in her own right, and there's an incredible relief that comes, I think, also in being like, yeah, I know that you'll melt. You're in a lot of ways, she's a better musician than I am, and a way better singer. I mean, like, I can't sing. I can sing. You know, it's okay. I can sing. Okay.
Come on, man. You did the Scarecrow and the Wiz. You done now. You did a
thing, okay, Robert. And but like, you know, I can't sing like Satya's got the voice, of angel. Like, she's blessed. And so that's fucking amazing.
Come on.
Yeah. So it's really cool, man.
The three of you, you bring such artistry and such mastery to each of your disciplines and your hybrid identities as hyphenate artists. I want to pull up White Bread, because this is just like kind of like the creme de la creme of collaboration in terms of special effects, astounding music, visual. This is just superb. So let's take a little look at White Bread and talk about it.
I'm 11. It's my first day of middle school. My class from Oak Terrace merges with the other schools in the sister town of Highland Park. The morning roll call in my homeroom sounds like Finkelstein, Gold, Greenberg, Levy, Qua, Kui. Oh God. Quijada, Rosenberg, Stein. A kid sitting in front of me has a knit circle pinned to his head. It's green, yellow, and red. Kind of reminds me of a Bob Marley album. I introduce myself. Hey, I'm B. Hi, I'm Alex. You from Oak Terrace? Yeah, how'd you know? I don't know. Lucky guess. Hey.
Fast forward a bit. Let's see some of these visuals here. A little further
the day we
forward.
present our project in science.
Let's look at the multiple Satyas.
They think I'm white bread, just like Wonder Bread, like I wasn't bred right. White bread, they think I'm white bread, just like Wonder Bread, like I wasn't bred right. White bread, they think I'm white bread, just like Wonder Bread, like I wasn't bred right.
People said I'm white bread, just like Wonder Bread, like all I got is white kin, the widespread race of Caucasian. Must be a white town that she was raised in, or any other variation of that phrasing. But on every occasion, I'm of the brown persuasion, a product of US-bound migration, a combination.
So we're getting a little lag, but talk to us about how you visually made this happen, the concept, and the content, the idea of the brown and black folk when we're considered. Oh no, you're being white bread, like that combination of the social commentary, the artistry of the music, the visual. It's just.
I mean, in terms of content, it's always it's. I think that's a very. I think it's a very common story for I'm going to say brown folk, like the just somebody who feels between the black and white kind of diaspora, the
story of code switching.
The story of code switching, feeling like you're too white for your brown friends, or feeling too brown for your white friends, or like too brown for your black friend, or like whatever the case of not feeling like an in between. And then having to like switch back and forth between all these different languages, basically they are, and so that's where it comes from. I grew up in a town that was surrounded by really affluent Jewish community, and I was very lucky that I had that allowed me to have a great public school education because of property tax, but it's also like a weird place to grow up because of that, especially when we were the first brown people on the block. Now, if you go back, it's full. It's just full of brown people. It's amazing. So that's where I think the concept of the idea of the song come from. Visually, I mean, I think. We watched a bunch of other video, like Jacob Collier comes to mind in a lot of research that went into what this visual what the visuals of it would look like. But I'll let Matt and Satya talk a little bit more about that.
Shout out to Philip who helped edit this piece. It's funny, you show that clip and I just see 6 things that I would change.
I know! Of course! You're a director, man.
It's like so many things. I'm like, oh gosh, there's so many things. It was a big learning process of shooting to edit. I think we knew that we utilized a handheld fan that Actors Theater sent us, and so that it was, blowing in front of every musician. And we sort of mapped out the framing. I had a piece of paper on the Zoom screen that I had gridded out for each section of each band member, because Satya couldn't cross the plane, right? So when she was beatboxing, I was like, Satya, your behind is inching into the vocalist. So it was pretty much, you say special effects, but if you had witnessed us making it for 5 minutes, you would have been like, guys, this is the jankiest operation.
I'm sure there's like way easier ways to accomplish what we accomplished, but I'm sure we took like the hardest approach.
Yeah, probably it was obscene. But we knew that in terms of Brian's idea I was super interested in this idea of because visually you can achieve the feeling of all of the various Satyas, right? The various identities being in conflict with each other, and to be able to realize that visually felt super exciting, and there was so much potential there. So we knew we wanted to start with the band and framing the individual shots of the band members, and then a full band in Satya's, I'm just going to say one more time, 8x10 guest room. And so it was pretty wacky.
Spectacular. I know we're approaching our hour, and I just want to make sure that we have an opportunity to just again, this is not just working on a virtual platform or a digital platform. I just want to really acknowledge it's working on a digital platform, filming in quarantine. And again, these three extraordinary artists have not been in proximity in order to realize this labor of love that is so exquisitely realized, which I think is just an extraordinary achievement in any way. But it's such beautiful work, and we certainly at Actors Theater are so incredibly proud. I just want to end up with a final question for each of you. What were you most afraid of, and what did you learn from this experience?
I keep learning. I'm still learning. I don't even know where to begin with the question of what did we learn. We have been learning and educating ourselves about every single facet of this show and the social injustices that we talk about within it, and teaching, going to the looping school of Brian, the YouTube school of filming, and like learning how to make a film. We are all theater people, the three of us, and so we went into this project knowing that we needed to learn a lot to even get the baseline of what we needed to accomplish with this project. So I would say the thing that I have learned most is to really absorb every opportunity to learn in a process like this. Because I'm still learning. Even as we do interviews and we reflect on the process, I am still freaking learning about this. And that is in itself terrifying, that everything of what we have presented is an amalgamation of everything we've learned in our lives thus far, and all of the new things that we were still learning in this process. And I think there's nothing scarier than to show someone a not fully perfected and honed in skill set. Like, these are just new skill sets. And I think that was really scary, to just risk it and be vulnerable and throw this project out there in a time where no one had any concept of what virtual theater is or could be. We're still learning. I don't know if that answered your question at all.
Man, does it ever. Beautifully. Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I it's always, I think it was scary to, when you have a personal story like this, and it's and my only experience with it was it coming out of my mouth. It's always like, will it work? Or can it be reinterpreted with somebody else? And I think that it works. And what's great is I hear people, reaching out, being like, it kind of lives in this beautiful medium on this fence between theater and film, where you kind of can't describe what it is, because it does encompass a lot, like what Satya was talking about, the live component of it, and being like, this is the take where we are, but also incorporate White Bread, where this can only be on, people being like, I don't even know, people watching this movie or digital presentation and being like, I don't even know how that would have been done on stage, how and that's really exciting and really cool. And I think what I've come of this, right? Watching it now and now that it's all over and put together and it's released, right? I'm very inspired by the interdisciplinarianism of what all of these artists here are. Like, I'm an actor, a writer, a playwright, blah, blah, all these hyphenate things. And now we're adding like video, like content creators who I'm excited for a time when the world will normalize and we're coming out of these with all these skill sets and what we make is multimedia, and leveling up. Basically, we all are being forced to level up in this time, and I'm excited for when theater in the traditional sense or whatever that means kind of adds this skill storytelling to it, and that's really exciting. And I'm inspired by these guys and by y'all who are doing a season entirely like it, like entirely digital.
Matt, what were you most scared of, and what did you learn?
Well, I continue to learn that you can take nothing for granted with this work. That with the bleed of as artists, the professional and our personal lives and space, and that Satya Chávez was an entire production team, and without the willingness, fortitude, and grace to put this production on her shoulders, it wouldn't have happened. And with a partner who made space for that, with partners, mine and Satya's, and I think that was the fear that we couldn't pull it off, and that in having to cultivate these skill sets that I didn't have the knowledge to pull through. And I'm really charged by the possibilities of that this work allows for. And I hope that as we rethink the systems of old in the way that we were making theater, I'm excited to be blazing this trail with these two brilliant artists and with the support of ATL. And I'm also excited to continue to examine the how and the what we're making, and to accountability and how we can all be better, is what I'm learning.
But Matt Dickson is, what's great is Matt Dickson has been working nonstop. I feel like Matt Dickson is working more important. He is the hottest digital virtual freelance director in the biz right now.
Talk about blazing the trail. This is the new media king.
Seriously, not working nonstop. Just like, it's great. It's like he knows so much about this medium that is we're fresh into it, and then we're living in this very specific time when that is all we can consume right now, and that's very exciting for all of us. But Matt, I feel very lucky that Matt is helmed this production.
Yes,
yeah.
Actors Theater.
Thanks, man.
Realize it's only the best.
Well, two things for me before we go, because I know we gotta wrap it up. But one, I will say that I feel very, very lucky to have someone like Matt on this project with me. I know I did a lot of the physical, manual, heavy lifting of the piece to get to actually press the record button on the camera, but the emotional and all of the other behind the scenes things that take endurance, Matt was a champion, and he listened to every emotional breakdown. He listened to every concern about authenticity and cultural appropriateness, and just held space, just continually held space, and continues to hold space for hard conversations in such a gracious way, that I've felt very grateful for the amount of work that he's put in, especially especially on the editing front, once we got past all of the filming and the sleepless nights, the many sleepless nights. Thank you, Matt. And then also, I would be remiss if I were to not, because I know we're about to pull up a clip here on our way out, I would be remiss to not mention a very, 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 very important part of this project. And her name is Carmela Caldarch, who is the animator on this piece. She is a longtime family friend of mine and Kristen's and my partner's. Who is Brazilian. She's that Latina queer woman, and she's a genius. And when we had big old question marks about what this show needed, she was the answer all the way through. And everyone should just go look at her page and follow her. She's brilliant. She's really, really brilliant. And managed to capture the childlike innocence and creativity in complete black and white picture. It just manages to be so colorful and so vibrant and so creative, and in black and white scribbly lines, stick figures. Please enjoy her work. Thank you, Carms.
Well, we're grateful for all three of you and Carm's extraordinary work. And thank you so much for joining us today for this especially celebratory celebration of your work. It's just wonderful work. Thank you, each and every one of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Philip, take us out with some Quijada.
Woo, woo, woo.
Thank you, Philip.
Quijada. That's my name. Quesadilla is a cheese-filled tortilla. Those are not the same. Quijada is a different word. Quijada means jaw, and calling me something else is completely absurd. You see, I come from a long line of strong-jawed people. My great-great-grandfather's jaw size had no equal. A humble man who never bothered anybody. He was peaceful until a weasel, jerk-faced man who was evil, decided one day to make fun of my great-great-grandfather's strong-jawed face. He was like, ha, ha, ha. Look at that guy's jaw. It's the most horrendous and tremendous thing I ever saw. If you compared him to the ugliest person to ever live, it would probably be a draw. So my great-grandfather ran away to lock himself in his place, stayed in his home for 20 years, too afraid to show his face, cried himself to sleep every night, until one day, finally, he vowed to claim redemption, pulled out of his depression just to teach the jerk a lesson. He announced his rebirth as Lord of the Mouth, came out of seclusion and marched straight to the jerk's house, knocked on the door, and waited. When the jerk came out to answer, right then my ancestor ate him. Ah! Then he ate his family, then he ate his dog, and he did it all happily. Then he burned down the house and peed on the ashes. No regrets and not a sliver of compassion. The jerk's neighbor smelled the smoke and called the police. When the cops arrived, old man Quijada ate them piece by piece. Ah! 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 The mayor was told no one was patrolling the streets, that a man calling himself the Lord of the Mouth was making his meat out of any man who crossed his path, eating humans alive, shouting, "Feel my jaw's wrath!" The mayor called the president, who then called the Pope, and collectively made a decision to offer up gold in hopes of having old man Quijada controlled. But as the story goes, my ancestors